parasha of Vizot HaBracha. And this parasha is the final moments of Moshe Rabbeinu's very own life, where he speaks to Bnei Israel, he gives them their last blessing, and as we're soon going to see, his last rebuke. There's a very famous verse. This verse actually is called the Hatan Me'ona. There's 3 Hatanim on Simchat Torah. There's the one who finishes the Torah, Hatan Torah. There's the one who starts the Torah, that's Hatan Bereshit. But there's also Hatan Me'ona, which is actually the first one. Normally, one of the kids go up to the Torah, and all the kids come under a talit. And a lot of candies are thrown. And one kid goes up and he reads the 3 psukim of Hatan Me'ona. So, what exactly does it mean? What's actually going on? The Zera Shimshon delves extremely deep into this specific portion. So the verse reads as Me'ona Elohe Kedem, which is a very, very, very hard thing to translate. The word Me'ona doesn't really have a translation. And Elohe Kedem means the God of all time. So I'll read you the way Rabbi Hirsch translates Me'ona Elohe Kedem, and maybe that'll give us a better understanding what it means. He says it's the God of antiquity, is the bearer of each passing moment of time. So it's very, very, very deep. Meaning HaKadosh Baruch Hu has been there from the beginning and will always be there, and He knows everything. It's a tremendous praise to God's omnipresence and His creative power and His understanding power in its greatest depth. And then it ends off with Umita'at Zerot Olam, Vaigaresh mipanecha oyev, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu, He banishes out and He shoos away the enemies. So now, the Zera Shimshon quotes a midrash. The midrash says, the first part of the pasuk that says, Me'ona Elohe Kedem, God who is the bearer of all time and He knows everything, that's talking about tzaddikim. Tzaddikim who commit themselves to Torah and mitzvot, to which the world was created on their behalf and sustained on their behalf because they are sustaining and learning the Torah and fulfilling the mitzvot. The end part of Vaigaresh mipanecha oyev means, look how the Midrash says, it means when HaKadosh Baruch Hu made the Jewish people victorious over Haman HaRasha. All the way to the time of Purim. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu, He shooed away the evil Persians with their evil, unfortunate leader, which was Haman, who was at the head of all of that chaos. So the Zera Shimshon asks a series of questions. He says, first of all, what is Moses doing by alluding to or mentioning Haman right at the end of the Torah and right before he passes? That's number one. Number two, the Jewish people had so many enemies, or were going to have so many enemies in the future. Out of all the enemies, He chooses Haman, but He couldn't have chose Hitler. He couldn't have chose any other horrible oppressor, dictator over the Jewish people. He had to choose Haman. Seems very, very interesting and weird why Haman would be chosen. And furthermore, he says, what's the connection between the beginning of the pasuk, speaking about the tzaddikim, who the world was created and is sustained in their merit of fulfilling Torah, to Haman and Hashem saving us from Haman? He's having a hard time with this midrash and what, according to the midrash, Moshe was alluding to towards his very final words. He answers as follows. He says, Vizot HaBeracha was Moshe's final words. It was a very difficult and hard time for Moshe. He knew he was passing. Yet he loved Bnei Israel so much, so he was warning them. He was warning them, unfortunately, if they don't fulfill the Torah, there's going to be some hard stuff that come. Some things which are not going to be so pleasant. But there's one thing you could hold on to which will guarantee your success, and that is the Torah. However, Moshe felt, maybe one day the Yehudim are going to come and say, we never accepted the Torah. You know what Hashem did to us? He picked up the mountain and He held it over us and said, accept the Torah or else. It's like, when you put a gun to someone's head and you say, do such and such or else. They're going to do it. Even if it's something positive, even if it's something to their benefit. So, how could it be that Bnei Israel are going to fulfill it? They might come and say, we were forced into it, we don't want to do it. And to that, Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, don't worry. Even if one day they will come and say that, one day in the future, Bnei Israel will re-accept and recommit themselves to Torah. When? By the victory of Haman after Purim. The Megillah says, Kimu v'kiblu. They got up and they re-accepted the Torah. They got it again. Why re-accepted? Because finally then they accepted it out of love. The first time you could claim that they were forced into it. But you know what sustains the Torah. You know what the blessing of the Torah is. And once they accepted it out of love, forevermore, there was no way that it could be shaken out of them or taken away from them. And that's what the Zera Shimshon says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what the Zera Shimshon is saying that Moshe Rabbeinu was doing at the end of his life. He said, don't worry. Hashem will always be there to shoo away. You know in whose merit? In the merit of the tzaddikim. Who's a tzaddik? A tzaddik is someone who's committed to Torah, learns Torah. The world was created on their behalf, and the world will be sustained on their behalf. So to answer all of our questions, we answered why Haman at the end of his life. We said it's out of his love. Moshe was mentioning out of his love at the end of his life to the Jewish people, that then when Bnei Israel will overcome Haman because Hashem's kindness after shooing him away, that's when you know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will always hold on to you because you're committed to Torah. And the connection is obvious between the beginning and the end. And now, why at the end of his life, and out of all enemies, specifically it was when Haman was there and they beat Haman, is when they accepted it with love. So we see from here this tremendous connection of accepting something and doing something with love. There's doing something when you're forced, there's doing something when you're loved. Even by Torah, even when we fulfill mitzvot, there's a level of sometimes doing something when you like it or not. There's doing something when you love to do it, you enjoy to do it. It's like cooking when you want to cook or cooking when you don't want to cook. It's like writing something, building something, doing something when you want to do it and when you put your whole heart into it or not. So Moshe Rabbeinu was telling Bnei Israel, you know what to hold on to? Hold on to Torah. But you know how it's going to be everlasting? When you accept it with love. He was warning them for the future. Don't let the Torah out of your hands. But even if, Hashem will always be there for you, because there will come a time where Bnei Israel will accept it with love. So may HaKadosh Baruch Hu bless us to always learn Torah, fulfill Torah with the love that was imbued in us when we re-accepted Torah in the time of Purim, in the time of Mordechai, and instead they overthrew Haman